Welcome to the Revelations of Life channel. The weather is whispering, a wise man once said. Obviously not about rain and slush, Philip thought, setting the wipers of the Kamaz truck on a more dynamic mode. The experienced truck driver was already approaching his hometown. Ahead of him there was a break between runs. He could enjoy himself with his beloved wife, parents and friends. Unexpectedly, his truck was cut off by an SUV, so he had to step on the brakes. The huge weight of the truck affected its inertia on the slippery road. The semi-trailer immediately began to skid into the neighboring lane. Philip managed to level the vehicle with great difficulty. These manipulations produced a perspiration on his forehead. The mood was finally ruined. Now it was no longer the joy of seeing his family and loved ones that popped into his inflamed imagination. It is important to see the hidden camera footage first. All these suspicions must be put to rest. I'm getting a little nervous because of Lidka's twists and turns. Now let's find out what reason she has for being so zealous in her grooming and makeup. These thoughts involuntarily made my foot press harder on the gas pedal. The Kamaz began to pick up speed again. It was good that the road was almost clear. Apparently, bad weather frightened away all the tireless Dacha and gardeners, who always create huge traffic jams at the entrance to the city. And after half an hour, Philip parked in front of the house and ran to his apartment. The sturdy man did not even wait for the elevator, but climbed to the 6th floor on foot. Here, he took a moment to breathe in front of the door as he inserted the key into the keyhole. The trucker could not wait to quench his thirst for curiosity. "Hi," he threw to his wife, who had already returned from work and was preparing for the arrival of the beloved in the kitchen. Apparently in our country it is customary to wait for the long-awaited guest, or even husband, with the traditional bread and salt. That is why Lydia was cooking on all the burners of the stove, trying to meet her husband, as they say, fully armed. "Honey, you're all ready." In his wife's voice, there was a genuine joy of meeting. "I'll be right there." Philip, throwing off his shoes and carelessly throwing his jacket on the pouf by the entrance, rushed into the bedroom. Here, he immediately opened the middle drawer of the dresser, where his personal belongings were stacked, and took out from its depths a laptop. Putting the gadget right on the bed, he opened it and, finding the video file he wanted, began watching it. For the first few seconds, Philip wrinkled his forehead and breathed loudly, recovering his normal state after a quick walk. The man watched carefully what was happening on the screen on the accelerated viewer, afraid to miss the most interesting thing. Here's the wife coming in after work and undressing in the bedroom before taking a shower. Here she is going to bed. It is morning. Lydia awakens, squinting amusedly at the first rays of sunlight coming through the not too tightly drawn curtains. She gets up and does her morning walk. It seems that the jealous husband has nothing more to worry about. Soon the woman begins to do her makeup and get ready for work. And indeed, Skorikova is meticulously grooming herself. She seems to have begun to perform this feminine ritual more carefully. Philip was about to close the lid of his laptop when a completely incomprehensible picture began to unfold before his eyes. Lydia threw off her home robe and remained in a nightgown. To the great surprise of her husband, she did not go to the closet to choose clothes for work, but climbed back into bed, covered under the blankets. The words, "I'm ready," rang out, after which a stranger walked into the bedroom with a tray in his hands. The longshoreman stared at the screen in horror. For a moment, he even cried out in surprise. After all, Lydia in an instant transformed from such a familiar and native wife into some Hollywood star with a prim demeanor. She yawned mockingly and deliberately began to squint, imitating a sudden awakening. "Darling." There was an artificial drowsiness in her voice. "Lidusik, my charm, my lily of the valley." The stranger leaned over to Skorikova and somehow too picturesque kissed her on the cheek. "Shit, this devil looks just like me. And the figure, and the haircut, and even the homemade suit. And what does it all mean?" The trucker's thoughts triggered a huge fit of jealousy that looked for an outlet. Suddenly, a very incomprehensible picture appeared on the screen. Lydia got out of bed and, throwing on her robe, rushed to the dresser where the video camera was installed. She quickly reviewed the tape and shouted into the hallway, "This take is not good. We have to do it again." After these words, the wife climbed back into bed and pretended to be asleep. It was like a flash of lightning occurred in Philip's head. At that moment, the young man involuntarily looked over his shoulder and saw his wife standing at the entrance to the room. Lydia was looking at her husband with interest, trying not to make any noise in order not to frighten him. "Ledoc." Philip was clearly at a loss. "I'm here." "Yes, I can see you're here." The wife was pinned up and made a stern look on her face. "Do you want to explain to me?" The man found himself. Yes, the tactic of attack often brings success when the defense lost the last sense. And yet, not long ago, the family Skorochov led a very traditional way of life, with all the consequences. The spouses have been married for more than 5 years and already seriously think about becoming parents. "Philip, don't you think it's time for us to think about continuing the Skorochov family?" Lydia spoke important words in the most casual tone. It was this trait of her character especially liked her husband. After all, it was expressed in the stability and constancy. The young man had seen enough of the other families of his acquaintances, where the nervous disposition of women always led to turmoil and unwarranted quarrels. You can't adrenaline all day long. You can get to the point of having a nervous breakdown. So much for the Italian temperament in our northern latitudes. My Lidka is always calm and confident. You can even watch soccer with her when there's a Mexican show on TV. What a woman. Philip often thought when his friends and acquaintances shared their family problems with him. Continuation of the family, you say? It is possible. The head of the family approached his wife and grabbed the petite woman in an armful with his huge arms. Yes, Philip's anthropometry was fully consistent with the image of a traditional trucker. A kind of Goliath who could change a tire on a Kamaz and bend a horse show with his bare hands if necessary. But the latter was of no use in the city conditions. Therefore, the repair work on a heavy truck was sufficient in its entirety. "Put me on the floor, bear." Lydia amusingly wiggled her legs in the air. "You wife, make up your mind what you have to do." For the continuation of the race, or on the sexual stability of the emphasis, in the voice of the spouse felt cheerful. "Can I talk to you seriously?" The wife tried to get out of the firm grip of her husband, but it did not work out. "All right, baby. We can make babies." Philip lowered Lydia and lavishly kissed her on the lips. When the long breath-holding no longer allowed to be in a state of tenderness, the girl broke away from her husband. "You could be a great parent." My wife tried to get her breath back. "I know." He was rapturously looking at her. "And what do you want? A boy or a girl? You should strive for perfection." My wife winked playfully. "Then we will expand in both directions." Philip was in the 7th heaven from happiness. "We need to start preparing for this event in advance." Lydia became serious. "So what is there to prepare? I can always." The man made a perplexed look on his face. "Responsibility. That is the key word when it comes to children." The wife raised her index finger up and then held it to her husband's nose. He looked at the tip of the finger with amused eyes, which caused a burst of laughter from the wife. When the funny episode was over, Lydia continued the theme of the conversation. "We need to prepare not only morally but also financially. Imagine how much we have to spend after the birth of a child." The girl paused for a second to make sure her husband was listening carefully. "It is clear." Philip nodded his head. "Prepare the baby's room. That's one. To be able to buy not only diapers and food, but also educational toys. That's two." Lydia, with a serious look, began to list the upcoming expenses, curling her fingers on her hand for reassurance. Then the couple for the first time fully discussed their future in the context of having children in the near future. The Skorokovs even developed a kind of financial plan for the occasion. This family document reflected all income and expenses. This tabular form, entered into the computer, looked very much like a quarterly or annual accounting report. When it was completely finished, Lydia even suggested fixing this historic event with a ceremonial tea party. For this occasion, Napoleon cake was baked, and the most recent Ceylon tea of the freshest variety was brewed. Yes, Lidok, you're serious about this business. Philip, with great appetite, was munching on a huge piece of homemade pastry. Children are serious. His wife looked lovingly at the man of her dreams. Time passed, and the Skorikovs began the process of building family capital. Many expenses that used to be considered justified were now abolished. No need to throw money to the wind. We already have where to spend it. My wife would often say, if her husband suddenly wanted to withdraw from his paycheck. This approach quickly began to pay off, but his wife still felt that the family's rate of growth of wealth was not active enough. And at some point, both Philip and his parents even began to notice in the behavior of his wife some strange things. The young woman began to pay more attention to their appearance. She began to have expensive jewelry, cosmetics, and grooming products. Philip, is it just me, or has your wife really become something else? Are you spoiling her like this, or are there secret admirers? The trucker's parent was trying to find out the latest family news from him. What are you talking about? We have everything as usual. Lidok is just very responsible to his appearance. We've switched to austerity mode. We're going to have a baby. We need to save some money. The boy looked at his mother with surprise. However, Maya Afanasievna continued to insist that her feminine look and life experience tell her about the presence of love of a young woman. Mom, so it is clear that she is in love with me. Philip couldn't imagine even in his wildest dreams that his woman could cheat on him. Oh, my son, how many deceived men in the world thought so, until they were convinced of the contrary with their own eyes. The grey-haired pensioner shook her head anxiously. So, I do not like this conversation, and I'm not going to continue it. The son indignantly got up from the sofa on which he was sitting when he visited his parents. That time, Philip paid no attention to his mother's words. However, he soon had a conversation with a school friend who lived next door. Hi, long time no see. Valery Kiragazov joyfully approached his former classmate when he saw him in the yard of the house. Hello. So you're the one sitting flat on the couch while I have to drive all over the country. Skorikov was also happy to meet his friend. I met your Lidka the other day. I'll tell you, she's become such a bimbo. Do not recognize her. The young man made a characteristic gesture with his hand, raising his thumb up. You, don't look at other people's wives too much, or you'll lose your eyesight. The guy slapped his friend on the shoulder in a playful way. Damn bear. Be careful how you express your feelings. You could break some bones. I'm telling you, she's a beauty. Why didn't you tell me what happened? Valery watched his neighbor carefully. She had reached her optimum age. 30-something is the most Chinese. Didn't you know that? Skorikov suddenly began to realize that he was missing something very important. You know best, expert. Lidka was one of the prettiest girls in our class, and she chose you, apparently, because of your height. Kiragazov smirked carnivorously. You say. Not one of the beautiful, but the most beautiful. And I chose it because I was the coolest in the class, including you. A jealous tone began to appear in the trucker's voice. Man, is it really true that Lidka had an affair with someone? Here and Velaka, like my mother, keeps telling me that she was something else. We need to figure it out. Only how? I'm always on the road. Oh, I wish I could quit my damn job and become a couch potato husband, to keep my beloved under a tight hood, so that she could even breathe only under supervision. The jealous man's thoughts began to develop in a certain direction. That's right. I remember how you alone took down 3 guys who looked at Lidka obliquely in senior year. Valera smiled in the manner of Hollywood actors, showing a straight row of white teeth. Do not sparkle bone, Joker. I'm going home. I'm very hungry. Philip had already decided what to do next. Yes, it was not very easy for the young man. After all, everyone was trying to drum into his head that his wife had a lover because of her frequent business trips. This logic often occurs to interested people when they witness the inexplicable facts. Well, How can a young woman who is not the first year of marriage so blooming look? She would be immersed in everyday life and family problems with her head and already wave at the appearance. It's like she's a bridesmaid. There's something wrong here. Will tell the average person who has known such a young person for a long time. And so before the next flight, which according to the plan should last about 2 weeks, Philip meets Karogazov again. After the usual greetings, the buddies decided to pile into the local sports bar, where they were to show a broadcast of a soccer match involving their beloved Spartak. While a quarter of the first half was going on, and the teams were looking at each other with their dull soccer, the friends once again touched on a subject that was painful for Philip. Listen, my friend. I need some delicate advice. The jealous man unconsciously looked around. All your delicacy is written on your face. Did you find out something about Lidka? Valera was never distinguished by scruples, so, as they say, cut off the shoulder. Not learned, but only going to. Tomorrow on the road for 6 months. And I do not feel very smooth. Philip fidgeted in his chair and absent-mindedly looked at the monitor screen, where the ball rolled lazily by the players in the center of the field. You should hire a detective. But he was thinking strategically. It is clear. Only I do not have so much money in my pocket, and I cannot stealthily withdraw from the family. The young man was already thinking about it himself. Then you have to do the work of a detective yourself, and it's free, but not entirely professional. Valerie's voice had the spirit of an adventurer. How is that? The trucker stared at his friend in surprise. Man, what a bastard. The young man in Spartak paraphernalia slapped himself on the knees after the forward of his team shot past the opponent's goal, and then returned to the begun conversation. Install a hidden camera in the bedroom. His comrade's words very slowly reached Skorikov's consciousness. The young man even shook his head, trying to concentrate. He had just suffered a microscopic stroke after another unrealized, beloved moment, and now he had a very important choice to make. Man, on the one hand, a loved one should be trusted completely, but on the other hand, it is better to know the truth than to suffer in the unknown. That's a long way to the asylum. Thoughts flashed through the mind of a jealous husband. And you, I see, an expert on relationships. Just remember, not a word to anyone. You know I would not like it, with all the consequences for your fragile health. The big man tapped his friend on the shoulder. He winced at the pain, but kept silent, all the more so as Spartacus finally opened the scoring. That day, a very important decision was made that wasn't hard to implement. Don't worry about the technical aspect. I already have everything. I can even help with the installation. When are you leaving tomorrow? Valerie continued to stare intently at the plasma screen. Tomorrow night. Philip's voice sounded a kind of doom. Good. I'll come in the afternoon when you're home alone, and we'll do everything first class. Kurahazov rubbed his palms vigorously in anticipation of the surveillance. After his return from another long voyage, his husband began to look through the contents of the disk on his computer, where all the information was downloaded from the camera. And when his wife caught him doing this unsightly activity, he had to make excuses. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'll explain. The wife walked up to her husband, exuding kitchen sense. Only it will be a little later. And now I ask you to justify your own behavior. How did you end up like this, hubby? Lydok. Well, think about it. I'm always on the road, and about you here I said so much. Her husband's voice was shaking, and his face was very pale. And what kind of gossip have you collected on your mighty ears? The wife was evidently growing furious. And then Philip told his beloved wife in all the colors of what 2 weeks of the voyage seemed to him an eternity. His inflamed imagination painted the most unpleasant pictures. The young man dreamed of filthy scenes in which his wife allowed all sorts of obscenities. What a fool you are, Skorichov, summed up the girl after her husband's detailed story about his jealousy. Couldn't you just talk to me? I am so guilty, Lidok, that right now I am ready to lay my head on the scaffold for execution. The longshoreman's face now looked like a ripe Turkish tomato, ashamed. And so Lydia told the jealous husband about his creative research aimed primarily at creating a new source of income. Well, I could not sit still when so much money is needed for the education of our baby. The woman involuntarily stroked her belly. Honey, are you pregnant? Philip jumped up to his wife and grabbed her with his arms and whirled her around the room. As the story unfolded, it turned out that Lydia had decided to run a blog, The Real Woman Awakening. In it, she gave a target audience sound advice on how a beauty queen should feel in the morning after sleep. Naturally, she needed extra beauty products, a closet of homemade clothes, and even partners as a spouse. When Lydia came out to substantial monetization, she was even able to hire a professional actor. He was the one Skorikov saw on the tape. After Philip found out all the details and decided to help his wife in her endeavor, the phony husband was immediately fired. True, we had to explain to the subscribers that the new screen image is the real spouse. The main thing is that this did not affect the result of the commercial project in any way.